You guys know I love dungeon crawling board games on there. I love going into the dungeon, grabbing the loot, fighting the minions, facing the boss. Essentially having that role-playing game experience condensed into 2 or 3 hours on there. And while I love playing with a team and I love co-op games, a great example would be the Dungeons and Dragons Adventure series, Wrath of Ashardalon, Ravenloft, and Temple of Elemental Evil, which is certainly one of my favorite games there. They work because the game itself, through cards and spawning, creates the narrative and handles the AI and the mechanics. Dark Souls would be another example on there. And some of these games do it passable. Some of these games do it really, really well. But then there is the concept of the Overlord. And when we see this with games like Descent First Edition, Descent Second Edition, we see this with Dungeon Saga, another title that I really enjoy playing, where you have the party, and they're a team, and then you have the Overlord, not the game master, not the dungeon master who's there to tell a story. No, as the Overlord, you're there to crush the players. You're there to be absolutely ruthless. You are there to expend the monsters, the resources, the boss, and utterly obliterate them. And that's what you're supposed to do. You can't be angry at me, right? Well, maybe you can on there, but an Overlord type game brings a lot of fun and a lot of dynamics because it allows you to be evil to your friends and to totally justify it under a game on there. So what are some of the core tactics that involve an Overlord? Because certainly there's different rule sets for Descent. Conan, another great game that I love, uses the Overlord mechanic. Dungeon Saga, but this idea of one versus many is formulated through 2 parts. The first part, what you're going to see in all these games, is you're going to control, actually I guess 3 parts, 2.5 parts. First part is you're going to control some sort of set minions, some sort of, skeletons, monsters, war dogs, pirates, whatever it's going to be. It might be a fixed number. You might be able to spawn some more, but they're going to be what, for the most part, causes damage and prevents the players from accomplishing the mission in that moment. You're also going to have some sort of Overlord powers. This could be the Overlord cards, like in Descent, where they let you spawn traps or more monsters or inflict curses on a player. This could be, like in Dungeon Saga, the Overlord cards that allow you to raise more dead or mess with the orientation of the players. It could be something like in Conan, in the River of Dread, where you now get to kind of play your extra powers, your extra gem resources to summon more reinforcements or possibly cast a spell. So you've got these 2 primary resources going on. At the same time, it's modified by the map. And this is the first question with being the Overlord and figuring out what tactics you're going to apply. Those tactics are, is it a fixed map or a hidden map? In Conan, the board game, the map is laid out on there. You see everything. There might be some hidden information, but for the most part, hidden information on where some monsters are or where they may spawn. But for the most part, you know everything. There's very few surprises. If we see something like Descent First Edition, as you explore, you come up to a door, everything else is closed off. You open the door, you build the dungeon out. This game is a little bit more challenging for the players and easier for the Overlord because they don't know how big the dungeon is. Dungeon Saga does this really well because the dungeons tend to be, well, no spoilers here, they tend to be kind of small and compact, but they're connected by multiple entry points, multiple corridors, multiple doors. So very, very dynamic in how they play, but you still don't know, unless you're replaying the mission, how big or how small it is on here. Hidden dungeons make things much easier for the Overlord because the players have to spend more time and be more cautious on that. Sticking together as a group, working together as a team. And as the game continues on, they're not going to do that. So it's going to force them to pull apart by the very nature of trying to explore, and that's what you're going to exploit. Now, Descent 2nd Edition, everything's kind of revealed in most of the missions on there. That makes things a little bit harder because now the players have that advanced knowledge. While they might not know what monsters are going to spawn there, they can work and kind of push and stick together. So how do we go against beating the players on there? And then I guess we got to look at the opposite side in the next podcast as players in a one versus many game or Overlord scenario. How do we deal with that? So the timer here is this for all of these games. At the beginning, the players are the strongest. They have the most powers, they have the most life, they have the most resource gems, they have the most whatever. As the game continues, they might find some loot, they might find some potions, there might be a limited leveling up in the moment as it happens, but they're going to get weaker and weaker in their resources. The Overlord generally starts weakest in the beginning, but is able to spawn more minions, able to bring lieutenants into play, able to bring bosses into play, and able to utilize the trap cards and the various cards that they draw. So the time to strike, that is the question. The time to strike, usually mid-game or end-game on there. So what we're looking at, I'm not going to name any names with the people that I play. I love you guys very much, but there's some players that go off scripts. There's some players, I'm thinking about Zombicide from a couple of weeks ago, where you go into the game, okay, it's the four of us. We're going to move here. We're going to keep the wizard in the back, archer in the back and support, barbarian and dwarf in the front. If we do get bogged down, the dwarf will just tank, and the barbarian, who's a little bit faster but less armor, will flank or kind of push through to open ways up. Right? You come up with some sort of plan. You figure out some sort of plan. And then there's always one player that, I got to go after that chest, or I got to see this, or I want to clear this room. So you'll see this party start to fragment. You'll see it start to pull apart on there. Instead of occupying a radius of 4 or 5 or 6 spaces where they can cover each other with movement and lanes of overlapping magic and fire and attacks, they get separated. That's when you strike. That's when you move with your minions on there. And usually that happens about mid-game. You got to push into the dungeon a little bit. You got to reveal some treasure. What you're looking to do is slow them down. So I'm not going to commit and try to go against, this analogy of in Dungeon Saga, the dwarf, the barbarian, the elf archer, and the human wizard on there. I'm not going to try and out-tank the barbarian and the dwarf. They just smash things on there. So I'm not going to try and throw 3 or 4 skeletons or 3 or 4 zombies on them and drown them out. What I'm going to try and do is use my zombies, my minions, whatever they're going to be. In Dungeon Saga, they're zombies and skeletons. And based on the map of where I am, where can I block their movement? Can I, if it's a corridor that's only one space, it goes from four squares down to 1, can I put 2 zombies in the way and let them spend game turns chewing through the zombies? It's not about necessarily attacking, it's about delaying on there, because as you delay, that's going to look to separate the group. That's also going to give you time to spawn more powers and cards to build up a really devastating hand to then play against them on there. Naturally, I'm going to look to attack whoever's weakest in there, if the party lets me. So I'm trying to block, I'm trying to spawn, I'm trying to use my powers. If I don't beat the party, the group, and now we're making it towards the end of the game. So we're beating on the minions, we got the 2 chests, we shut down the spawn point, we found the key, and now we're going to fight, the boss dragon on there. If I see that's how it's going, if it's mid-game and I haven't really caused a lot of damage and I might not be able to beat them, then I go into resource mode. I try to accumulate as much as I can in terms of cards. I try to back off, because remember, with your minions, you don't always have to attack. In Dark Souls, and I love the AI for Dark Souls, it plays by itself, the monsters generally attack. They have a pattern. They might move away and use missile weapons. They might run up and hit you and bump you. But it's mostly a forward linear motion on here. You don't have to attack as the Overlord. You can pull your skeletons back. You can pull your zombies back. You can pull them off to the side and wait. So what you're looking to do if they're reaching that boss moment, I'm looking to, right before they enter the final room, the final area, I'm looking to attack in a really big wave to cause as much damage as I can. Just bring down the health points, the gem resources, whatever it's going to be a little bit. And then I'm looking to attack with the boss, with the lieutenant, with the main minion, whatever it's going to be. I'm holding my cards, my Overlord cards in reserve. Because what's going to happen once the players go into boss mode, so I'm looking to bring down their life a little bit with one last kind of mass charge with my minions. I guess skeletons can mass charge on there. And when they fight that boss, if they fight the Etten in Descent, players are going to throw everything they can at that moment. They're really going to expend all of their resources, all their energy. They're going to overextend themselves because they're like, well, this is the last fight. I got to go all in. That's when you're like, boom, boom, boom. You start laying down the cards. You start laying down the Overlord powers. And because hopefully they've been weakened a little bit from your minion rush, the fact that they've blown their powers, their daily powers, their one-state powers, whatever powers on there, now they're weakest. And if you can weaken them further, often what we'll see, these games are dice-based. And the boss monsters, the giant snake in Conan, puts out mad dice, mad red dice to attack, almost equal to Conan itself. Dice are swingy, dice are swingy. A lot of people dislike dice games because they're too swingy. There's a chance anytime you roll dice that things are going to go crazy. Things are going to go insane. So if I'm rolling those boss dice, throwing things out, and I can weaken you a little bit ahead of time, bring down your life, expose you with my Overlord powers, that means if I get lucky, and the more dice you roll, the more chance of getting lucky on there, that could be the killing blow for the party on there. Obviously, I'd like to stop them in the beginning, but that's not always practical with how things work. But that's generally the strategy that I follow for these Overlord type games, because the DNA is the same. The one versus many, Overlord powers, minions, boss monster, treasure, exploration. That's the same across the entire spectrum. Things are a little bit different here and there. Resources are a little bit different here and there. How you exactly work that out, you kind of see and figure out. But remember, your job, and this is hard for me a little bit as a dungeon master, as a D&D enthusiast, I'm there with my friends to create a fun story and to explore this dungeon. But as the Overlord, I am there to crush them. I am there to just obliterate them. I am there to destroy their legend that they're trying to forge on there. So I want to have an equally brutal, and you want to have an equally brutal strategy to do that.